Hey everyone, this is Jungkook. Before we start, I want to know where you're listening from. Drop your country in the comments below. I'm curious to see where this story reaches, because today I'm about to share something with you that I never thought I would say out loud. This is personal, this is raw, and for a long time I kept this just to myself. But now it's time to let you in. I just confirmed my wedding date. Yes, you heard that right. I am getting married. Those words still feel unreal to say. For years, I believed that music, performing, and chasing dreams on stage were the only things that mattered. I thought that if I poured everything into my work, into the songs, into the endless nights of practice and perfection, I would feel complete. But the truth is, even after the biggest performances, even after millions of fans cheering my name, I would sometimes come back home and feel the silence wrap around me in a way that was impossible to ignore. Success has a strange way of amplifying loneliness when there is no one beside you who truly knows who you are behind all the lights. That silence started to change everything for me. It made me question what kind of life I wanted to build, not just as Jungkook from BTS, but as Jungkook, the person who also needs love, connection, and meaning beyond the stage. I know some of you might be surprised, maybe even shocked, because marriage is not something you expect an idol to talk about so openly. But I want you to understand, this isn't about headlines or rumors. This is about me finally realizing that love gives purpose to everything else. It all started about 6 months ago. My schedule had been relentless: studio sessions, rehearsals, brand shoots, endless flights between cities. Every day was filled with people, cameras, and noise. But deep inside, there was an emptiness I couldn't fill. One night, after another exhausting week, I returned to my apartment in Seoul. The rooms were dark, quiet, almost too quiet. I sat there staring at the awards on the shelf, the golden lights reflecting back at me. But instead of pride, I felt a strange ache. What good is achieving everything you thought you wanted if you have nobody to share the small, quiet moments with? That night, I made a decision. I needed to step away from the spotlight once in a while and do something that connected me back to real life, something that wasn't about perfection, performance, or recognition. I started volunteering at a small community center near Mapo, a place that organized meals and activities for children and elderly people. It wasn't a big announcement or a campaign. I just showed up quietly on a Saturday morning and began helping out. That's where everything changed. That's where I met her. She wasn't anyone famous, not a celebrity, not someone the world expected me to be with. She was a teacher, ordinary in the eyes of the world, but extraordinary in a way that words can barely describe. She walked into that center with the kind of presence that wasn't about being noticed, but about noticing everyone else. From the first day, I realized she was different. We were sitting during a short break when someone asked why we all volunteered. Everyone gave the usual answers: helping people, giving back, staying busy. But when it came to her turn, she said something that stopped me in my tracks. She looked up and said, "I volunteer because I want to practice being the person I hope to become." Practice being the person I hope to become. I've read countless quotes, listened to endless motivational speeches, and spent years chasing excellence through repetition. But I had never heard someone put it like that. Not about singing, not about dancing, but about character. It struck me like lightning. She wasn't talking about charity. She was talking about building herself deliberately, one small action at a time. And in that moment, I realized that she saw life in a way I had been missing. Later that day, I asked her what she meant. She smiled and said, "You can't just think about the kind of person you want to be. You have to practice it every day, in small choices, when no one's watching." She said it so simply, but it carried a wisdom that felt so much bigger than her years. And right then, I felt something shift inside me. Over the following weeks, I began to notice everything about her. The way she remembered names and stories about the people she helped. The way she carried the heaviest boxes without complaint, always choosing the hardest tasks for herself. The way she listened, really listened when someone spoke, without glancing at her phone or letting her mind wander. She was fully present, fully human, in a way that is so rare in our world of distractions. One Saturday morning, she picked up a slightly damaged box of supplies. The label was torn off, and she laughed softly, holding it up. "This reminds me of people," she said. "Sometimes you can't see what's valuable from the outside. You have to look closer." I'll never forget that moment. It wasn't just about the box. It was about everything, about how she looked at life, how she looked at people, and maybe how she looked at me. That was the moment I knew something was happening in my heart. Not because of her appearance, though she was beautiful. Not because of her profession or her age, but because of her mind, her heart, her character. I've been in relationships before, but they were built on attraction, shared goals, or the thrill of the moment. This felt different. This felt like meeting someone whose character I admired so deeply that I wanted to spend my life learning from her. The more I knew her, the more I wanted to become someone better. Not for the world, not for the stage, but for myself and for her. In those weeks, my life started to shift. I noticed I was spending less time chasing distractions and more time paying attention to small choices. I was more present in my daily life, more grounded in who I wanted to be. She didn't just change how I saw others. She changed how I saw myself. One evening, after finishing our volunteer shift, I asked if she wanted to grab a simple coffee nearby. Not as Jungkook from BTS, not as someone with fame or recognition, but just as me, a guy who wanted to know her better. She said yes. That night, we talked for hours. We didn't talk about music, charts, brand deals, or the latest headlines. We talked about books that shaped her, about her students, about what makes life meaningful. I found myself sharing things I rarely say out loud, my doubts, my fears, my struggle to find meaning beyond achievement. And then she said something I'll never forget. She looked at me and said, "You seem different here, more yourself, more at peace." She was right. In that small cafe, with no cameras, no fans, no spotlight, I felt like myself again, like the person I had forgotten in the noise of success. That was when I realized this wasn't just a connection. This was love beginning to take root. I know some of you may wonder about the age difference, the status difference, the fact that I come from a world so far away from hers. At first, I worried about that too. But the more I listened to her, the more I realized that wisdom isn't about age. It's about how much you've paid attention to life. And she had paid attention in a way that many never do. She had noticed truths about service, kindness, and purpose that took me decades to understand. The more time we spent together, the more certain I became. This wasn't just another chapter in my life. This was the beginning of the life I truly wanted to build. And that's why today, I can finally tell you, yes, I have confirmed my wedding date. The journey to that decision began with her words, with her heart, with her way of living. This is only the beginning of the story, but I want you to feel what I felt in those early moments. Because sometimes love doesn't arrive in fireworks and headlines. Sometimes it arrives quietly in the simplest acts of kindness, in the quietest corners of our lives. And sometimes it's in those moments that we finally realize what we've been searching for all along. After that first coffee together, something subtle but powerful began to change in me. It wasn't the kind of dramatic transformation you see in movies where everything flips overnight. It was slower, gentler, like water carving stone, one drop at a time. That night, I walked back to my apartment with a different kind of silence around me. It wasn't the heavy emptiness I used to feel, the kind that echoed against the walls and reminded me of loneliness. This time, the silence was warm. It was filled with her voice, still echoing in my mind, her words about practicing who you hope to become. The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual. My schedule was free, but instead of sleeping in like I normally would, I felt pulled to do something different. I opened the curtains and watched the light spill into the room. It hit me then, maybe this was what presence felt like. Maybe this was what it meant to pay attention, not just to my work, but to life itself. Over the next few weeks, our conversations grew. Sometimes they happened at the volunteer center, while we packed boxes or handed out meals. Other times, it was in quiet cafes or walks by the Han River. She had this way of making even the simplest moments feel alive, as if every second carried weight and meaning. She didn't rush through life, didn't treat moments as things to get past. She lived them fully, and that was teaching me to do the same. I remember one particular Saturday morning. The weather was gray and drizzling, the kind of day where most people would stay indoors. But she showed up at the center anyway, her umbrella dripping with rain, her smile unchanged. She said, "Service doesn't wait for perfect weather." That sentence stuck with me. I had spent so much of my life chasing perfection, perfect vocals, perfect choreography, perfect performances. But here was someone reminding me that love and character weren't built in perfect conditions. They were built in the rain, in the imperfection, in the choice to show up anyway. That day, I watched her interact with an elderly man who had come for food supplies. He was frail, his hands trembling slightly as he tried to carry the bags. She stepped forward without hesitation, took the weight from him, and walked alongside him outside under the rain. Her umbrella tilted more toward him than herself. She got soaked in the process, but she didn't mind. She came back laughing, hair damp, sleeves wet, but eyes shining. In that moment, I realized that this was the kind of love I wanted to build, a love that doesn't flinch at inconvenience, that doesn't step back when things are messy, that gives without calculation. After weeks of volunteering side by side, I finally gathered the courage to ask her out for dinner. My voice trembled a little when I said it, because this wasn't a casual thing for me. This wasn't about dates or surface level attraction. It was about wanting to know her heart in a deeper way. She said yes, and that night, we spent hours sharing pieces of ourselves we rarely showed others. I told her about the strange paradox of fame, the way millions of people know your name, but so few know your real thoughts. I admitted that sometimes I felt like I was performing even when I wasn't on stage, as if every move had to be curated, every word filtered. She listened quietly, her eyes steady, her presence unwavering. And then she said, "You don't have to perform here. Just be." Those words hit me harder than I expected. Just be. It was so simple, yet it felt revolutionary. I had spent years trying to live up to expectations, my own, my fans, the world's. But with her, I felt like I could finally breathe. I didn't have to be the polished version of Jungkook. I could just be Jungkook, the person. As weeks turned into months, I noticed how much her influence was reshaping me. I started paying attention to things I used to overlook. The sound of rain against the window, the laughter of children at the center, the taste of a simple home-cooked meal. These were the kinds of things she valued, the kinds of things she noticed. And by noticing them with her, I was learning how to live more fully. But alongside this growth, I also felt fear. Fear of what people would say if they knew, fear of how fans, the media, the entire world would react. I had lived long enough to know that privacy was a fragile thing. Relationships could be torn apart by public pressure before they even had a chance to grow. I wondered if I was being selfish for even considering this. Was it fair to bring her into a life so relentlessly scrutinized? Was it right to dream about marriage when so many people expected me to belong entirely to my career? One night, I voiced these fears to her. We were sitting by the river, the city lights shimmering on the water. I told her, "I don't know if I can protect this. I don't know if I can protect you from the weight of my life." She stayed silent for a moment, then looked at me with a calmness that surprised me. "You don't have to protect me from your life," she said softly. "You just have to live it with honesty. If we're honest, if we keep showing up as ourselves, that's enough." That was the moment I realized I wasn't walking this path alone. She wasn't afraid of the storms that came with me. She was willing to walk through them, umbrella tilted toward me if necessary. And that realization was the beginning of certainty. I began to imagine a life beyond the stage lights. A life where mornings weren't about rushing to the studio, but waking up beside someone who knew me, really knew me. I imagined small routines, cooking breakfast together, walking through markets, sitting on the balcony as the sun set. They weren't grand visions, but they were the kind of moments I longed for in the quiet spaces of my heart. That's when the thought first crossed my mind. Marriage. Not as a distant possibility, but as a real choice. For the first time in my life, I wasn't just dreaming about achievements. I was dreaming about commitment. I was dreaming about a date when I would stand with her, promise my life to her, and begin a new chapter that wasn't written for the world, but for us. And that's why you're hearing this now. Because those small choices, those quiet conversations, those rainy Saturdays, they led to this moment. to the confirmation of a wedding date that once felt impossible for someone like me. This is the story of how I got here. And as I share the next parts with you, I want you to see not just the romance, but the transformation. Because love, real love, doesn't just change your relationship, it changes you. There's a moment in every relationship when something shifts. It's not always loud or dramatic. Sometimes it happens in silence, in the middle of an ordinary day when you suddenly realize that the life you want is right in front of you. For me, that moment came one Saturday morning at the community center. We had been sorting through donations as usual, boxes piled high, some neatly packed, others a mess of items that didn't quite fit. The room smelled faintly of cardboard and soap, with sunlight streaming through dusty windows. It was nothing special, just another weekend of service. But as I stood there watching her coordinate a group of volunteers, I felt it. A sudden, undeniable clarity. She wasn't barking orders or trying to control anyone. She simply moved from person to person, remembering names, asking questions, making sure everyone felt included. When someone grew tired, she noticed before they had to say anything. When a child wandered in, she knelt down to their level, listening as if their words were the most important thing in the world. And in that moment, I realized she didn't just make me want to be better. She made everyone around her better. That was when the thought crystallized. This is the person I want to spend my life with. Up until then, love had been something I experienced with hesitation. My career, my life in the spotlight, the constant schedules, it all made relationships complicated. I'd always believed marriage might be something for later, after everything settled down. But as I stood there watching her, I knew that waiting no longer made sense. Life would never settle down. My work would always be demanding, my public life always noisy. If I wanted real love, it had to be chosen in the middle of the chaos, not after it ended. That night, lying awake in bed, I let my mind wander through the possibilities. What would it mean to be married? Not in the abstract sense, not as a distant dream, but in reality. I imagined walking into a home that wasn't just mine, but ours. I imagined holidays spent not in hotel rooms, but with family around the table we both belonged to. I imagined someone to share secrets with at midnight, someone who would be there when the lights faded, when the fans went home, when the stage was empty. I thought about my parents, about the way they raised me to value sincerity above everything else. My mom used to tell me, the truest love is the one that makes you more yourself, not less. And that's exactly what she did for me. With her, I didn't feel the need to perform or impress. I didn't feel pressure to be perfect. I felt like myself, flawed, human, but enough. Still, I wrestled with fear. Could I really make this public? Could I really open my life to this kind of vulnerability? I knew once the news was out, the world would speculate endlessly. Some would celebrate, others would criticize. The age difference, the fact that she wasn't from the entertainment industry, the idea of Jungkook being taken, all of it would become headlines. Was it fair to drag her into that storm? One evening, I decided to be honest about those fears. We were sitting in a small restaurant tucked away in the streets of Itaewon. The place smelled of sesame oil and grilled meat, with soft music playing in the background. I looked at her across the table and said, "Do you ever think about what this means? What it means to be with me, not just the person, but the public figure?" She didn't answer immediately. She took a sip of tea, then placed the cup down carefully. Her eyes met mine, steady and calm. "Of course I think about it," she said, "but I don't love you because of that. I love you despite it, and if the world wants to watch, let them. As long as you and I know who we are, that's enough." Her words disarmed me. I had been bracing for hesitation, for doubt, maybe even fear. Instead, she gave me certainty. And in that certainty, I felt courage rising. After that night, something inside me changed. I stopped thinking of our relationship as fragile, something that needed to be hidden. Instead, I started imagining it as solid, something that could endure even under pressure. I began to picture not just the next date, but the next decade. One memory stands out vividly. We were walking by the Han River one evening, the air cool and sharp with the hint of winter coming. The city lights reflected on the water, and people strolled by us with coffee cups and scarves wrapped tight. She was telling me about one of her students, a boy who struggled with reading but refused to give up. The way she spoke about him, her patience, her admiration for his effort, it made me realize something. She wasn't just shaping her students, she was shaping me too. She was teaching me that love is about seeing potential and nurturing it with patience. That night, I couldn't stop thinking, this is marriage material. Not because she was perfect, but because she saw imperfection and chose to love anyway. Because she understood that growth happens slowly, through effort, through practice. And that's exactly how I wanted to live the rest of my life. From then on, I started planning in my head. Quietly, secretly, I imagined how I would propose, what I would say, how I would make it meaningful without turning it into a spectacle. I didn't want fireworks or media coverage. I wanted something simple, something true to us. I pictured us at the community center again, side by side, surrounded by the ordinary beauty of service. That was where it all began, and I knew that was where I wanted to begin the rest of our lives. As the weeks passed, I became more certain. Every time she laughed, every time she reached out to help someone, every time she reminded me to be present, the decision grew stronger. It wasn't about timing anymore. It wasn't about whether the world was ready. It was about whether my heart was ready. And it was... So one day, as we finished stacking boxes together, I turned to her. My heart was pounding, my hands trembling slightly, but my voice was steady. I know this might sound sudden, I said, but I need to ask you something. She looked at me curiously, wiping her hands on her sleeves. The world seemed to pause around us. Will you marry me? I didn't have a speech prepared. I didn't have a ring that day. All I had was honesty and love, raw and unpolished. For a long moment, she just stared at me, her eyes wide. And then, slowly, tears began to form. She whispered, yes. That was it. No cameras, no audience, no stage. Just us, in the place where we had found each other, promising a future that suddenly felt more real than anything I had ever known. From that day forward, everything shifted. It wasn't just about dating anymore. It was about building, about planning, about confirming a wedding date that would mark the start of a new chapter. And as we began those conversations, I realized this wasn't just my story anymore. It was ours. And that's how I arrived here, speaking these words to you now. Not as a performer, not as an idol, but as a man who has finally chosen love. There are certain days in your life that stay etched into memory, not because of grandeur or spectacle, but because of the way they made your heart stop and then race all at once. The day I proposed to her will forever be one of those days. It wasn't planned, not in the way people usually imagine proposals with perfectly timed music, a grand backdrop, or a crowd waiting to cheer. No. For me, it happened in the most ordinary of places, in the most ordinary of ways. And maybe that's why it was so extraordinary. We'd been at the community center, the place that had first brought us together. The building smelled faintly of rice and vegetables from the kitchen, where volunteers cooked for families. The wooden floors creaked under our steps as we carried boxes back and forth. Outside, the autumn air was cool, filled with the sound of children laughing in the playground nearby. I watched her as she worked hair, pulled back, sleeves rolled up, determination on her face as she lifted box after box without a second thought. She had this habit of humming softly when she worked, a tune that wasn't quite a song but carried a rhythm all its own. And in that small detail, I felt something swelling inside me, an overwhelming certainty. I had thought about this moment before, imagined it in a dozen different scenarios. Maybe I would take her somewhere romantic, like the seaside at Busan, where the waves crash endlessly against the shore. Maybe I would plan a quiet dinner in a hidden restaurant with candles and flowers. But in that moment, I realized none of that mattered. What mattered was honesty. What mattered was speaking the truth I could no longer hold inside. So I set down the box in my hands, turned toward her, and said her name. She looked up, surprised, brushing a strand of hair from her face. My heart was pounding, but my voice came out clear. I need to ask you something, I said. Her brow furrowed slightly, as if she thought I was about to ask for help with the boxes. But then she saw the look in my eyes, and something in her expression softened. I know this might sound sudden, I continued, but it's been in my heart for a long time now. You've changed the way I see life, the way I see myself, the way I want to live my future. And I can't imagine walking through that future without you. So I took a breath, feeling the world narrow down to just the two of us. Will you marry me? There was no ring in my hand, no rehearsed speech, just the weight of truth between us. For a moment, she just stood there, eyes wide, lips parted, as if searching for words. Then tears began to form, shimmering in the corners of her eyes. She pressed her hands to her face, then lowered them slowly, smiling through the tears. Yes, she whispered, and then louder, with a certainty that echoed in my chest. Yes, of course, yes. I can't fully describe the relief, the joy, the rush of emotions that hit me all at once. It was as if years of doubt, fear, and hesitation dissolved in that instant. The world didn't explode into fireworks, but my heart did. The noise of the community center faded, and all I could hear was her voice repeating that one word, yes. We laughed, we cried, and for a moment, we just held each other in the quiet corner of that busy place. Around us, life carried on as normal. Volunteers moved, children played, meals were served, but for me, time had stopped. That was the beginning of everything new. Later that evening, we sat together at a small cafe. The sky outside was painted in hues of gold and purple as the sun set. I held her hand across the table, still dazed by what had happened just hours earlier. We hadn't told anyone yet. It was our secret, a fragile treasure we wanted to keep between us for just a little longer. What now? She asked, smiling shyly. Now, I said, we start building the rest of our lives. That's when the conversation turned practical. We began talking about dates, about what kind of ceremony we wanted. At first, it felt surreal, like we were planning for someone else. But the more we talked, the more real it became. We both agreed on one thing immediately. We didn't want a grand spectacle. No huge stage, no endless guest list, no flashing cameras. We wanted something simple, something true to us. A ceremony focused not on appearances, but on the commitment we were making to each other. Still, there were realities we couldn't ignore. My life wasn't private. No matter how much we wanted simplicity, the world would eventually know. Fans, media, critics, they would all have something to say. We sat there, sipping coffee, imagining what that storm might look like. And yet, instead of feeling overwhelmed, we felt united. I don't care what people say, she told me, squeezing my hand. What matters is us. The rest, we'll handle it together. That word, together, became our anchor. It reminded me that love wasn't about eliminating challenges, but about facing them side by side. In the weeks that followed, we quietly began to make plans. We chose a season first, spring. There was something about the symbolism of spring that felt right. Renewal, growth, beginnings. A time when flowers bloom after the harshness of winter, when life awakens again. It mirrored what we felt in our hearts. Next came the date. We flipped through calendars, whispering to each other in hushed tones, careful not to let anyone overhear. After a few days of going back and forth, we circled one particular weekend in April. Neither of us said it out loud at first, but we both knew it felt right. It wasn't tied to an anniversary or a symbolic number. It just felt like the day our lives were meant to begin together. We kept it between us for a while, holding the secret close. I would wake up some mornings and think, this is real. This is happening. The boy who once thought love would always be impossible, too complicated, too dangerous under the spotlight, was now planning a wedding. And with every passing day, my certainty only deepened. The proposal hadn't been extravagant, but it was us. The wedding wouldn't be a spectacle, but it would be ours. And the date we had confirmed wasn't just a day on a calendar, it was the day everything would change. As I sit here telling you this, I can still see that moment in my mind. Her tears, her smile, the quiet yes that turned into certainty. That was the day love became not just a feeling, but a commitment. The day my life took a new direction, not away from music or dreams, but towards something even bigger, love that could sustain everything else. And this is only the beginning. Because choosing a date is one thing. Living into the meaning of that choice, building a life around it, is something far deeper. And that's the part I want to share with you next. The days after we confirmed our wedding date were filled with a quiet kind of joy. We would text each other at random moments of the day, just a small heart, or the word April, or even just soon. And every time I saw her name on my phone, my chest felt lighter. For weeks, we lived in this secret bubble, walking through a city full of strangers, with the knowledge that only we shared that in a few months, we would stand together and promise forever. But even as that joy grew, a shadow lingered. I knew that sooner or later, the world would find out. And once it did, nothing would be the same. I've lived with the intensity of public attention for most of my life. I know the rhythm of headlines, the way a single word can be twisted into endless speculation. I know how fans can love fiercely and yet struggle to accept change. And I knew, deep down, that the news of my marriage would create waves I could not control. The thought weighed on me. Late at night, I'd lie awake, scrolling through fan posts, imagining how those same timelines would explode once the announcement came. Would they feel betrayed? Would they think I had hidden something from them? Would they accept her or tear her apart? One evening, unable to hold the thoughts in any longer, I brought it up with her. We were sitting in her apartment, the smell of jasmine tea filling the room. She was grading papers from her students, a red pen in hand, when I said, "What if people don't accept us?" She paused, setting the pen down. "People or fans?" "Both," I admitted. "You know how intense it can be. Once they know, it won't just be about us anymore. It will be about opinions, articles, rumors. I don't want you to get hurt." She looked at me, her eyes steady. "Jungkook, I knew who you were when I met you. I knew your life came with cameras, with judgment, with all of it. But love isn't about waiting for the world to approve. It's about choosing each other anyway. And I choose you." Her words silenced the noise in my head for a while. But still, the fear remained. We began preparing in small ways. I told my closest friends, first people who had walked with me through thick and thin. Their reactions varied, from shock to joy, but the common thread was support. "If she makes you this happy," one of them said, "then that's all that matters." Telling my family was harder, not because they wouldn't accept her, but because of what it meant. My mom cried when I told her. She held my hands and said, "I prayed you would find someone who sees you, not your fame. If she's that person, then I'm grateful." My father nodded quietly, pride in his eyes. They had seen me struggle with loneliness, with the weight of expectations. Now they were seeing me step into something real. Each conversation reminded me that, while the world outside might react unpredictably, the people who mattered most were with me. That gave me strength. But there was still the question of how to tell the public. Should I make a statement? Should I let it leak naturally? Should I share it through music, through a letter, through a video? I wrestled with those options endlessly. Every path felt risky, every option vulnerable. Then one day, she reminded me of something simple. "Don't overthink the method," she said. "Just be honest. Speak in your own voice. That's all you can do." So I began drafting words in my head. Honest words, not polished by PR teams, not filtered by managers. Words that came straight from me. I practiced them in the mirror. "Hey everyone, this is Jungkook. I have something important to share." My voice would catch, my heart racing as if the fans were already listening. It wasn't just nerves, it was the weight of knowing that what I was about to say would change everything. There were nights when doubt almost swallowed me. Nights when I thought, maybe we should just keep this to ourselves. Maybe privacy is safer. But every time I looked at her, every time I remembered the way she tilted her umbrella towards someone else in the rain, I knew hiding wasn't the answer. Love, real love, deserved honesty. So we started preparing for the storm. We talked through scenarios. What if the media dug into her past? What if fans tried to find her family? What if rumors spread? She met each scenario with calm resilience, reminding me that her worth wasn't defined by public opinion. "They can write what they want," she said, "but we'll still know the truth." That's when I realized something. The storm wasn't something to fear. It was something to weather, and we would weather it together. The decision to make the announcement came on a quiet Sunday evening. We were sitting on the balcony, the city glowing beneath us. I turned to her and said, "It's time." She nodded, no hesitation in her eyes. That night, I called my team. I told them I wanted to record a message, not a press release, not a headline, but a direct message from me to the fans. Something honest, something vulnerable. They hesitated at first, worried about timing, about impact. But I held firm. "This is my life," I said. "This is my choice." The days that followed were filled with rehearsals, not of dance or song, but of truth. I sat in front of a camera, speaking from my heart. I stumbled at times, emotions breaking through. But every stumble reminded me this wasn't about perfection. It was about honesty. When I finally recorded the message, I began the way I always wanted. Hey everyone, this is Jungkook. I just confirmed my wedding date. Even as I said the words, my hands trembled, but my voice was steady. Because for the first time in a long time, I wasn't performing. I was simply sharing my truth. And as I finished the recording, as I sat in the silence that followed, I realized something important. The storm was coming, yes. But on the other side of it was freedom, the freedom of living authentically, of loving without hiding. And that was worth everything. The moment finally came. My message was ready, my heart steady enough to let it out. Sitting in a quiet studio, just me and the camera, I looked straight into the lens and spoke the words I had rehearsed so many times. Hey everyone, this is Jungkook. I just confirmed my wedding date. Even as I said it, I could almost hear the collective gasp that I knew would echo across the world once those words reached people's screens. I spoke slowly, carefully, explaining how love had changed me, how this wasn't about leaving behind music or fans, but about growing into a more complete version of myself. I reminded them that every song I had ever sung carried pieces of my heart, and this was simply the next chapter of that same heart. When the recording ended, there was silence. No applause, no immediate feedback, just silence. The video went live the next morning. I woke up earlier than usual, nerves twisting in my stomach. My phone was already buzzing nonstop on the nightstand. Notifications stacked on top of each other, texts from friends, calls from my team, alerts from social media. For a moment, I hesitated to even look. The unknown felt heavier than any truth I had carried before. When I finally unlocked my phone, the world was already on fire. On Twitter, my name trended at #1 globally within minutes. Headlines flashed across every platform. Jungkook confirms wedding date. Global superstar to marry. ARMY reacts to shocking announcement. Some posts were celebratory, fans sharing their love and support with heart emojis and tears of joy. Others were filled with confusion, disbelief, even anger. The spectrum was wide, and it hit me like a wave. I scrolled through the comments cautiously. One fan wrote, "I always knew he deserved real love. Whoever she is, I hope she makes him happy." Another wrote, "I can't believe this. My heart is breaking, but if Jungkook is happy, then I'll try to be happy too." But then came the harsher voices. "He betrayed us. How could he hide this from fans? She doesn't deserve him." Each comment felt like a stone thrown into my chest, some soft with love, others sharp with judgment. But through it all, I kept remembering her voice. "You don't need to protect me from your life. Just be honest." As expected, the media swarmed. Paparazzi camped outside buildings. Tabloids ran speculative stories about who she was, where she came from, how we met. Some got details right, many didn't. I watched as strangers pieced together fragments of her life, twisting them into narratives that suited their own agendas. It was overwhelming, suffocating at times. That first week was the hardest. Everywhere I looked, there were opinions. Every time I checked my phone, there were questions I couldn't answer, judgments I couldn't correct, rumors I couldn't control. I wanted to shield her from it all, to build a wall so high the world couldn't reach her. But she wouldn't let me. One night, I showed her some of the headlines. She skimmed them, then shrugged gently. "Let them talk," she said. "They don't know me, they don't know us. What matters is that we know." Her calmness was like an anchor in the storm. When I felt myself drifting into doubt, she pulled me back with simple truths. The reactions from fans continued to flood in. Some organized hashtags of support number happy for Jungkook trended in multiple countries, filled with fans posting edited videos of my happiest moments, urging others to celebrate with me. Others struggled more openly, sharing their heartbreak but also their willingness to accept. I knew it wasn't easy for them. For years, my life had been intertwined with theirs in a way that blurred the lines between idol and friend, performer and companion. To them, my love life wasn't just personal, it felt personal to them too. I respected that. I understood it. And that's why I wanted to be honest in the first place. Behind the noise, life with her remained steady. We still volunteered at the community center, though we had to be more careful about attention. We still took walks by the river, though now with masks and caps pulled low. We still laughed, cooked, argued, and loved like before. The outside world was chaos, but inside our world, we stayed grounded. My bandmates were some of the first to reach out after the announcement. Their texts range from teasing to deeply supportive. "So, our maknae is growing up," one wrote, followed by a dozen crying emojis. Another called me directly saying, "I'm proud of you, man. It takes courage to live your truth." Their words meant more than I could express. These were the people who had seen me at my most vulnerable, who had stood beside me through every stage of life. Their approval was like a blessing. My parents too reached out daily, checking on how we were holding up. My mother reminded me, "Storms pass, Jungkook. What lasts is love." My father added quietly, "You've made a choice many fear to make. Stand by it proudly." Their wisdom echoed in my mind whenever doubt tried to creep in. The most surprising reaction came from fans themselves. After the initial wave of shock, many began writing long letters, posting heartfelt videos, and even sharing stories of their own relationships. Some said my honesty gave them courage to pursue love in their own lives. Others admitted they cried at first, but then realized they wanted nothing more than my happiness. Slowly, painfully, the tide began to turn. Still, I knew not everyone would accept it. Some fans left, some criticized loudly, some swore they could never support me again. That hurt, but it also reminded me that love, real love, always requires sacrifice. You can't live authentically and please everyone. One night, as I lay in bed next to her, phone buzzing endlessly on the nightstand, I whispered, "Do you regret saying yes?" She turned toward me, her hand brushing mine. "Never," she said. "Do you?" I shook my head. Not even for a second. In that moment, I realized the storm wasn't something to fear anymore. It was proof that our love was real enough to be tested. And no matter what the world said, no matter how loud the noise became, the truth remained simple. We had confirmed our wedding date, and we were walking toward it together. The world had found out, the headlines had exploded, the fans had cried, celebrated, debated, and through it all, we stood side by side, ready to build a life not defined by the noise, but by the quiet strength of our love. And this was only the beginning of what would come next. When the world finally knew, the noise around us didn't disappear, it grew louder. There were interviews I didn't give, but that others speculated on, articles I never approved, but that still carried my name in bold. Some fans turned away, others turned toward us with stronger love than ever before. And while the outside world swelled with opinions, inside our own little world, something deeper began to take shape. Preparation. Not just preparation for a wedding, preparation for a life. At first, we started small. We talked about where the ceremony should be held. Did we want it indoors or outdoors? Should it be in Seoul, where I had built so much of my life, or somewhere quieter, less obvious, less likely to be invaded by cameras? The answers didn't come quickly. We sat with those questions, sometimes for hours over dinner, sometimes while walking hand in hand by the river. "It doesn't matter where," she said once, her voice calm but steady. "What matters is what we promise each other there." That struck me, because for so long, I had been trained to think about setting, presentation, perfection. Every performance in my life had been about where and how it looked. But this wasn't a performance. This wasn't about how it would appear to the world. This was about the vows we would make. Vows meant to last longer than any stage light. One evening, as we sat in her apartment planning details, I asked her, "What does marriage mean to you?" She thought for a long time before answering. "Marriage isn't just about love," she said finally. "It's about commitment when love feels easy, and especially when it doesn't. It's about showing up again and again, even when you're tired, even when you disagree, even when life feels heavier than you thought it would." To me, marriage is about building a life where two people don't just love each other, they choose each other every single day. Her words sank into me like truth I had been waiting my whole life to hear. Because I realized then that what I wanted wasn't just the beauty of love in the beginning. I wanted the grit of commitment in the middle. I wanted the resilience of love that grows deeper with time, tested by storms, strengthened by practice. That night, after she had fallen asleep beside me, I stayed awake staring at the ceiling. I thought about all the years I had spent chasing perfection, chasing applause. And I realized how little that applause meant if it wasn't grounded in love, in connection, in something beyond the moment. What I wanted now wasn't perfection. It was presence. It was honesty. It was a commitment that could outlast fame, outlast fear, outlast even the noise of the world. So we began preparing the ceremony with those values in mind. We chose simplicity over extravagance. Instead of a grand hall filled with hundreds of people we barely knew, we wanted a small gathering of those who truly mattered: our families, our closest friends, the people who had seen us in our most vulnerable states. We didn't want luxury for its own sake. We wanted meaning. When we spoke about the vows, we decided to write them ourselves. Not scripted lines, not borrowed promises, but words from our own hearts. I knew mine would not be polished or perfect, but I also knew they would be true. There were moments, of course, when the reality of the outside world crept in. My team reminded me of security concerns. Planners asked about guest lists, about logistics, about how to handle inevitable leaks. Each question pulled me back toward the machine of fame, the part of life that always demanded control and perfection. But she kept reminding me, this isn't about the world, this is about us. Those words became our compass. Whenever I felt overwhelmed, I repeated them to myself. This is about us. In quiet moments, I began to reflect more deeply on what commitment meant. Commitment wasn't just about saying yes once. It was about saying yes 1,000 times in the days and years that followed. Yes, I will listen. Yes, I will forgive. Yes, I will stay, even when it's hard. Yes, I will choose you, even when the world makes it complicated. I thought back to my parents' marriage. They had their struggles, arguments, financial worries, the weight of raising children in a world that wasn't always kind. But what I remembered most wasn't the struggles. It was the way they always came back to each other. The way they showed up for family dinners even after long days. The way my father looked at my mother when she laughed, even after decades together. That was commitment. That was what I wanted. As the date drew nearer, anticipation grew inside me. Some nights I could hardly sleep, lying awake imagining what it would feel like to see her walking toward me, to stand before her and say words that would bind us together for life. My chest would tighten with nerves, but underneath the nerves was peace. Because no matter what the world thought, no matter how loud the outside voices became, I knew one thing with absolute certainty. This was the right choice. We began practicing small rituals together, things that felt like previews of married life. Cooking dinner, not just as a meal, but as a practice of partnership. Making decisions together, not just about the wedding, but about daily life. Supporting each other through stress, through exhaustion, through unexpected setbacks. Each small practice became a brick in the foundation of the life we were building. One evening, she said something that has stayed with me ever since. We were sitting on the balcony, the city glowing beneath us, when she turned to me and said, "The wedding is just one day, but the marriage, that's every day after. Let's make sure we're preparing for that more than anything else." She was right. The wedding would be beautiful, yes, but it was only a doorway. What mattered was the life we would step into afterward. And so, even as we discussed flowers, venues, and vows, what we were really preparing for was the daily practice of love. Looking back now, I realized that this season of preparation wasn't just about logistics. It was about transformation. It was about learning what it means to give yourself fully to another person, not in grand gestures, but in daily choices. It was about realizing that marriage isn't the end of freedom. It's the beginning of a deeper kind of freedom, the freedom of knowing you don't have to walk alone anymore. As the ceremony approached, I felt both the weight and the wonder of it all. The boy who once feared love would be impossible under the spotlight was now preparing to stand in front of the people who mattered most and make the most vulnerable promise of his life. And even though the world outside still buzzed with opinions, inside there was peace. Because in the end, the wedding wasn't about them. It was about us. The days leading up to the wedding felt both impossibly long and painfully short. Each sunrise brought me closer to the moment that would change everything. And yet each day seemed filled with tasks, decisions, and emotions that stretched time into something heavier than usual. Every detail mattered now. Guest lists had to be confirmed, security finalized, outfits chosen. The florist wanted to know which colors we preferred. The venue coordinator asked about seating arrangements. Photographers needed to be briefed, even though we had agreed to keep it all minimal, private. Every conversation reminded me that while the world thought about a wedding as an event, what we were preparing for was much more a covenant, a vow, a life. She, as always, was calmer than me. When I fretted over whether the ceremony should start in the late afternoon or early evening, she smiled and said, "The sun doesn't care what time it sets, neither should we." When I worried about which song should play as she walked down the aisle, she shrugged and said, "I don't care about the song, I care about walking toward you." Her simplicity anchored me. I was used to performance, to rehearsals where every detail was choreographed. But this wasn't a stage, and she reminded me of that again and again. This wasn't about perfection, it was about presence. Still, I couldn't ignore the nerves that gnawed at me. Some nights, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, my mind racing with questions. What if something went wrong? What if she regretted her choice at the last minute? What if the world's noise became too loud for us to bear? I hated myself for thinking these thoughts, but they came anyway because love, as beautiful as it is, always carries the risk of loss. One night, with the ceremony just a week away, I confessed these fears to her. We were sitting on her couch, surrounded by scattered notes and half-finished plans. I said, "What if I fail you? What if I can't be the husband you deserve?" She set down the notebook in her hands and looked at me, her eyes steady. "You will fail me sometimes," she said quietly, "and I will fail you. That's not the point. The point is that we keep choosing each other anyway." Her words pierced through the fog of my doubts. They reminded me that marriage wasn't about never failing. It was about never walking away. The final week before the wedding was filled with contrasts. On one hand, there were joyful moments trying on our outfits, laughing at how nervous we both looked in front of the mirror, writing our vows late into the night. On the other hand, there were heavy moments, phone calls with planners about security concerns, rumors swirling online about the location of the ceremony, articles speculating about her identity. I wanted so badly to shield her from all of it. But every time I tried, she reminded me, "We're in this together, don't carry it alone." So we carried it together. 3 days before the ceremony, I visited the venue alone. It was a small garden tucked away behind tall walls, hidden from the busy streets of Seoul. The air smelled faintly of pine and freshly turned earth. There was a simple archway draped with white fabric, rows of chairs that would soon hold the people we loved most. As I stood there, imagining her walking toward me, my chest tightened. For a moment, I could hardly breathe, not from fear, but from the immensity of it all. I thought about the boy I used to be, the teenager who dreamed of stages, who thought music was enough, who feared that love would always be out of reach. And I thought about the man I was becoming, the man about to stand in front of family and friends and promise forever. It was almost too much to hold. That night, I sat at my desk and finished writing my vows. My hand trembled as I put the words on paper, not because I didn't know what to say, but because I wanted to get it right. Not perfect, just true. I wrote about the first time I heard her say she wanted to practice being the person she hoped to become. I wrote about the umbrella tilted towards someone else in the rain. I wrote about how she made me feel more myself than I ever had before. And I wrote about the promise to keep choosing her every day, no matter what storms came. When I read them back, tears blurred the page. They weren't polished, they weren't lyrical, but they were mine, and they were hers. The night before the wedding, sleep refused to come. I paced my apartment, heart pounding, hands restless. The city outside seemed quieter than usual, as if holding its breath. I opened the window, letting the cold night air wash over me, and whispered to myself, "This is real, this is happening." I thought about the next morning, the moment I would wake up, put on my suit, and walk toward the garden where she would be waiting. I thought about the way her eyes would look when she said her vows. I thought about the sound of her voice saying my name as her husband for the first time. And even though nerves churned inside me, underneath it all was a peace I had never known before. Because no matter what happened tomorrow, no matter how loud the outside world became, I knew this. We had confirmed our wedding date, and we were walking into it together. The ceremony was almost here. The world outside was still buzzing with noise, but my heart was focused on one thing, the moment she and I would stand side by side. Not as two uncertain people, but as one united in promise. And in that anticipation, I realized something profound. Love doesn't remove fear. It teaches you to walk through fear with someone's hand in yours. The next sunrise would mark the day my life changed forever. The morning of the wedding began before the sun rose. I woke up long before the alarm, heart already racing, the quiet of my apartment pressing in around me. For years, mornings had meant rehearsals, schedules, makeup chairs, and stages waiting to be filled. But this morning was different. This wasn't about performance. This wasn't about applause. This was about standing before the person I loved and promising something that no stage could ever give me. Forever. I remember standing in front of the mirror, staring at my reflection. My suit hung perfectly on me, but for once, I didn't care about perfection. I cared about presence. My hands trembled as I adjusted the tie. I thought about the boy I had once been, the shy teenager with big dreams, the young man who sometimes wondered if he would ever find a love that felt real amidst all the noise. And now here I was, about to marry the woman who had shown me what real love looked like. The venue was quiet when I arrived. The garden was bathed in the soft glow of morning light, the air cool and fresh, carrying the faint scent of blossoms. Chairs were neatly arranged in rows, simple white fabric draped across the archway where we would stand. No flashing cameras, no elaborate decorations, just simplicity, just truth. Family and close friends began to arrive. I hugged my parents tightly, my mother's eyes already glistening with tears. My father clapped me on the shoulder, his silence carrying more pride than words ever could. My bandmates arrived too, each of them smiling in that way only brothers can, teasing me quietly, but their eyes soft with genuine happiness. Then came the moment I had been waiting for, the moment she appeared. Time slowed as she stepped into the garden. The world seemed to fade, the chatter quieted, and all I could see was her. She wore a simple dress, nothing extravagant, but the way it moved with her, the way it reflected her spirit, it took my breath away. Her eyes met mine across the distance, and in them I saw everything. Love, certainty, and the same mix of nerves and peace that churned inside me. As she walked down the aisle, I felt tears prick my eyes. Not because of the spectacle, there was none, but because of the truth of it. Every step she took was a step toward me, toward us, toward the life we had chosen together. When she finally reached me, I took her hand in mine. It was warm, steady, grounding. The officiant began to speak. Words about love, about commitment, about the meaning of marriage. But to me, the real ceremony was in her eyes, in the way her hand gripped mine, in the silent promise that passed between us. Then it was time for the vows. I unfolded the small piece of paper I had written days earlier, my hand trembling slightly. I looked at her, then began to read. I remember the first time you said you wanted to practice being the person you hoped to become. Those words changed me. They showed me that love isn't about perfection, it's about practice, about showing up every day, even when it's hard. You've taught me that character is built in the smallest choices. And because of you, I want to keep practicing kindness, patience, and love. Today, I promise to choose you every day. I promise to be present. I promise to love you, not just when it's easy, but especially when it's hard. I promise to walk with you through storms and to celebrate with you in sunshine. You are my home, and today I vow to build that home with you for the rest of our lives. As I finished, my voice cracked. She squeezed my hand, her own tears flowing freely. Then it was her turn. Her voice was steady but soft as she read her vows. Jungkook, when I first met you, I didn't see a global superstar. I saw a man who carried both brilliance and loneliness. I saw someone searching, even if he didn't know it yet. Over time, you showed me your heart, your fears, your hopes. You let me see the person behind the stage, and I fell in love with that person. Today, I promise to keep seeing you, not the idol, not the headlines, but you. I promise to walk beside you through every high and low, to remind you of who you are when the world gets loud, and to keep choosing you every single day. By the time she finished, there wasn't a dry eye in the garden. The officiant smiled gently and said the words we had been waiting for. By the power vested in me, I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss. And in that moment, as I leaned forward and kissed her for the first time as my wife, the world seemed to shift. The applause around us blurred into background noise. The only thing that existed was her lips on mine, her hands in mine, her tears mixing with mine. We were married. The rest of the ceremony passed in a blur of joy, laughter, embraces, congratulations from those closest to us. My mother sobbing into her handkerchief, my bandmates teasing me while wiping away their own tears, friends clinking glasses in celebration. It wasn't grand, it wasn't extravagant, but it was perfect. Later, as the sun began to set, she and I slipped away from the crowd for a few quiet minutes. We stood beneath a tree at the edge of the garden, watching the sky turn shades of pink and gold. She leaned her head against my shoulder, and I wrapped my arm around her. "We did it," I whispered. She smiled, eyes closed. "Yes, we did." And in that moment, I realized something profound. The wedding wasn't the end of our journey. It wasn't even the beginning. It was a continuation of every small choice, every act of love, every step that had led us here. The ceremony was just a doorway. What lay beyond it was the real story, the story of marriage, of building a life together, of practicing love every single day. As we walked back toward our family and friends, hand in hand, I felt lighter than I ever had before. For years, I carried the weight of expectation, the pressure of perfection, the fear of being truly seen, but now I carried something else. I carried love, and it was more than enough. The day after the wedding was the quietest morning I can remember in years. No cameras, no rehearsals, no blinding stage lights, just the sound of birds outside the window, the faint warmth of sunlight creeping through the curtains, and her breathing softly beside me. For a moment, I didn't move. I just lay there staring at the ceiling, letting the reality of it all sink in. I was no longer just Jungkook, the singer, the performer, the idol. I was Jungkook, the husband. It felt surreal, almost too good to believe. For years, I had wondered if love was something possible for someone like me. I had convinced myself that the intensity of fame, the weight of expectations, the endless schedules left no space for real intimacy. And yet here I was, married to the woman who had proven me wrong. The days immediately following the ceremony were filled with a strange mix of simplicity and depth. We didn't run off to a glamorous honeymoon or seek escape in some faraway country. Instead, we stayed close to home. We cooked simple meals together, walked along familiar streets, visited the community center where it all began. Each ordinary act carried extraordinary meaning. Washing dishes side by side, folding laundry together, laughing when we burned the rice. These weren't just tasks, they were symbols of the life we had promised to build. One evening, we sat on the balcony as the city lights glittered below. She leaned against me, her head resting on my shoulder, and said quietly, "Do you feel different now?" I thought for a moment before answering. "Yes," I said. Not because the world changed, but because I did. Because now I don't feel like I'm carrying everything alone. That's what marriage had given me already, a sense of shared weight. For so long, I had been used to walking alone through the chaos, carrying the pressure silently. But now, even in silence, I wasn't alone. There was someone beside me who saw me, knew me, chose me. Of course, the outside world didn't stay quiet. Headlines continued. Fans debated. The media speculated about our future. Some celebrated the marriage as proof that love could thrive even in the spotlight. Others questioned how it would affect my career. I read the comments carefully at first, but over time, I realized something important. The noise no longer held the same power over me. Because when I came home at night, there was love waiting. When I woke up in the morning, there was peace beside me. And that mattered more than any headline. Music, too, began to change for me. When I sang now, I sang with a new depth. Lyrics I once treated as performance began to feel like confessions. Love songs weren't just abstract stories, they were reflections of my life. Even fans noticed the difference. Some wrote that my voice carried something warmer, something more grounded. I knew why. Because now, every note came from a place not just of longing, but of fulfillment. But marriage also taught me something else. Love isn't the end of the story. It's the beginning of a harder, deeper story, the story of practice. In the weeks that followed, I quickly learned that commitment isn't just about the ceremony. It's about patience when we misunderstand each other. It's about compromise when our preferences collide. It's about humility when I realize I've been selfish. It's about forgiveness when words are sharper than they should be. There were moments I stumbled, times I came home exhausted, distracted, forgetting to ask how her day had been. times my temper flared when it should have softened, times when the noise of the world crept back into my mind, pulling me away from the present. But each time, she reminded me gently, marriage isn't about never failing. It's about choosing to come back again and again. And so I kept coming back. As I reflect on all of this now, I realize that confirming my wedding date wasn't just about a calendar. It wasn't about a headline. It was about planting a flag in the ground of my life and saying, this is who I am. This is what I choose. This is the person I will walk with into the future. The boy who once thought love was impossible found it in the quietest place, a food bank on a Saturday morning. The man who once thought marriage would only complicate things discovered that marriage simplified the most important truth. Love is about choosing. Choosing again and again in small ways every single day. To my fans who are listening to this, I want you to know something. I know this was surprising. I know it may have been painful for some of you. But I want you to understand that the love I found doesn't take away from the love I've shared with you. If anything, it deepens it. Because the music I create, the performances I give, the life I live, it's all stronger when it comes from a place of authenticity. If there's one thing my journey has taught me, it's that love doesn't diminish dreams, it fuels them. It doesn't take you away from your purpose, it roots you more deeply in it. And it doesn't erase your past, it redeems it, showing you that every failure, every heartbreak, every lonely night was preparing you for the day you finally understood what love really means. So what's next? Life. Ordinary, extraordinary life. Waking up each morning and practicing the vows we made. Building a home not out of walls, but out of trust, respect, and laughter. Continuing to make music, but now with a heart more open than ever. Loving my wife, not just with words, but with choices every day for the rest of my life. As I sit here reflecting, I think about the boy who once sang of dreams, the young man who once questioned if he could balance love and purpose, and the man now sitting here wearing a ring that symbolizes a promise. I realized that all along, love was never about finding someone perfect. It was about finding someone whose imperfections aligned with mine, someone whose presence made me want to be better, someone who showed me a better way to live. And that's what I found. So yes, I confirmed my wedding date. Yes, the world reacted. Yes, it changed everything. But what matters most isn't the date, the headlines, or the reactions. What matters most is this. When I stand beside her, I am not just Jungkook, the artist. I am Jungkook, the man who chose love, and who will keep choosing it every day. And to those of you listening, wherever you are in your life, whatever love means to you right now, know this. It is never too late. It is never too complicated. It is never too impossible to find someone who sees you as you are and loves you anyway. The greatest stories don't always begin with fireworks. Sometimes they begin quietly in the rain with someone holding an umbrella slightly more over you than themselves. That's what love is. That's what marriage means to me. And that's the future I'm walking into hand in hand with her, ready for whatever comes next. The date has been confirmed, the vows have been spoken, and the rest of the story begins now.